Good morning and welcome everybody to our phototherapy day. Today is going to be an amazing day with Engineering Tomorrow. We are so excited to have everybody here on the line. Do not hesitate to type in chat. We have an amazing presenter today, Ms. Joanna Cottle, who's going to be leading our introduction. So I'm going to pass it off to her to start our day. And again, looking forward to a fun day. Don't forget to type in chat and let us know if you have any questions or comments.
Good morning, everybody. As I said, I'm so excited to be here and share this super interesting challenge with you today. I am a mechanical engineer turned teacher. I spent about half my career as a mechanical engineer working for a large global construction company, working primarily in the power sector and power generation sector, building power plants. And then I transitioned to a career teaching high school, just teaching high school students like yourselves. I taught physics and engineering at an all-girls private school outside of Washington, D.C., where I live. And I actually just recently stepped away from my teaching job this past summer. So now I am loving helping out Engineering Tomorrow and talking to students like yourselves from all around the country. It's a pretty great gig, if I don't say so myself. So let me just share a couple of points about myself and my background, and then we'll get underway with the challenge. So I wanted to highlight just briefly my educational background because I did a program called a 3-2 program, which allows a student to study over 5 years at 2 universities and earn 2 degrees. And you might be thinking, why would I want to go to 2 different universities? I was an international student and graduated from high school in Mexico City in Mexico. And I'm the first girl in my family to go to college. So let's just say I didn't really have it all figured out. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do when I was heading off to college. And my college counselor at the time was so helpful in suggesting that a 3-2 program might work for me because it would allow me to explore a couple of majors without committing to one right from the start, which is often what you have to do when you're starting an engineering school. And so I went to Sewanee, University of the South, is a small liberal arts school. And there I could take a lot of prerequisite courses, but I also could explore physics, geology. I took some history courses. I could take a few more courses to work out some things that I would like to do. And what I found in that time was that I really enjoyed the applied aspects of physics and the hands-on nature, the lab experience that I was having at university. And so I knew really then that engineering was going to be a great career for me to take on. And so then I transferred to Georgia Tech in Atlanta and completed the requirements to get my mechanical engineering degree. So I know there's a lot of programs. There's community colleges that allow you to go on to an engineering school and do a dual degree program. So I just wanted to highlight that briefly as an option in case you have not heard about it before. In my career as a mechanical engineer, I was responsible for the mechanical systems on a power plant, working for the construction company that I did. We started with a proposal for a power plant on a piece of paper and sent in a bid to build the power plant. If we won the bid, then I would move from the proposal side of things over to the design side of things. So as a mechanical engineer, you're responsible for the pumps, the heat exchangers, some of the large mechanical equipment that goes into operating a power plant. Top left is a picture of a boiler feed pump. That's one of the major pumps in a power plant cycle that takes water from a source and pumps it to a boiler. The boiler heats up that water to boiling, producing steam, and then that steam is used to drive a steam turbine. As a mechanical engineer, I would also be responsible for making sure the performance of that power cycle met the requirements that we designed for. And then I would be also responsible for helping to start up and commission the plant. So in that role, I got to work with all different kinds of engineers and also personnel in construction, in startup and testing, and also consultants, noise consultants, environmental consultants, water quality, water treatment specialists. So I got to work with this wide array of people. And I have to say, that's one of my favorite things about engineering is you work on these incredibly challenging problems, but you're always working in a team very collaboratively. And you get to travel and you get to see something go, often see something go from just an idea to something tangible, like a power plant or an instrument or a therapy in this case that we're going to talk about today. So with that, let's dive into the challenge. Today, what you're going to do, we're going to introduce you to the field of biomedical engineering. And this engineering kind of is an interdisciplinary approach that kind of connects biology, physics, medicine. It's probably a discipline that I don't even think was available in college when I was going to college a few decades ago now, but is one that has really taken off. And I'm sure you have probably perhaps been thinking about a career in a medical field, and hopefully today you'll see some of the connections that engineers have in working on some of the cutting edge medical challenges that we face today. Today, specifically, what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to use light to treat a skin condition called Grover's disease. And so let me just introduce you to the team that developed this. Here is the team. Every Engineering Tomorrow challenge has been developed by a team, usually involving a professional engineer and then some engineering students. And this is a very special challenge because this particular challenge was developed by the founder of Engineering Tomorrow, Mr. Bill Woodburn, and you're going to hear from him later today. So I'm excited. I won't say too much more about that, but the college students that you're going to meet today and that have been working with Engineering Tomorrow are amazing, and they're going to be here to help you as you work through the challenge today. So let's dive into a little bit more. Let's get an introduction of what biomedical engineering is all about. While you're watching this video, I want you to keep in mind, kind of listen for the interdisciplinary nature of biomedical engineering. There's a lot of different roles that engineers can play in the medical field.
I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And then I discovered biomedical engineering. And I realized that instead of saving one patient at a time, if I could create something, I could save thousands of lives.
I think I've always been fascinated with the brain and how it works.
I was interested in medicine and I was interested in engineering. So biomedical engineering brings these two big fields of medicine and engineering together.
So you want to be a biomedical engineer? Well, you've come to the right place. I'm Bruce Wheeler, adjunct professor in the Department of Bioengineering at UC San Diego and past president of the IEEE Engineering in Medicine and Biology Society. Join me on a journey through one of the most exciting yet challenging and competitive fields.
The body actually has engineering principles built into it already, and it's just a question of uncovering them.
I've always been interested in how complex the heart is and everything that goes into making the heart function.
I basically want to help people walk again.
Biomedical engineers are dreamers, but we dream things that can become a reality.
In this overview of biomedical engineering, we'll give you the opportunity to sample and explore the many areas of focus within this vast field. Along the way, you'll meet world-renowned leaders in biorobotics, neural engineering, nanotechnology, tissue engineering, wearable sensors, and much more.
You have to love how the body is put together, how beautifully complicated it is.
You can challenge yourself constantly.
They'll expose you to their work, offer advice, and tell you about their own backgrounds.
A biomedical engineer is a person who is passionate about working at the interface of technology and medicine.
And I'll put you to work, giving you exercises that challenge you to try on the various areas to see where you might fit. Once you decide what areas pique your interest, we'll get you thinking about how to craft your own career, if you have what it takes and what it's going to take to get you there.
So obviously this video was an introduction to a biomedical engineering program at a university. But I think a major takeaway of the video is how broad the field is. You heard the speaker, the narrator, mention things like nanotechnology and neural engineering. A lot of biomedical engineers have a wide array of expertise in different areas, from computer coding to electrical engineering and circuitry to chemistry and mechanical engineering and fluid flow and physics. So it's a very broad field and can connect lots of different interests, hopefully, that you all have out there. To give you a roadmap of what we're going to do today, we're going to first go through the engineering design process to help solve the problem and of coming up with a treatment for a skin disease called Grover's disease. While we talk through the next few slides, keep in mind this central question. What is the time required to treat Grover's disease with blue light therapy? To answer this, there's a few things we need to know, right? We need to know, what is Grover's disease? What is blue light therapy? So let's get to it. To start with, Grover's disease is a skin condition that consists of a rash that can be quite painful on the chest and back. It's usually worse during the winter months, and it primarily affects people that are a little bit older, primarily men over the age of 40. The disease seems to go away on its own at its own pace, but there is no known cause and currently no effective treatment. There isn't really anything out there that effectively works on treating the rash, and that's why we're going to look at blue light therapy today as a possibility. Scientists know that light therapy has been effective in helping with other diseases, so we're going to take a look and see if that's a possible treatment for Grover's disease. So if you were to imagine that you and your class or a group of engineers working to develop this treatment, where would you start? We use the engineering design process to help us come up with a process for solving a problem. Comes up. You can see that this engineering design process, which you've probably already been introduced to, is kind of a circular process in that you are going to learn about the problem, then you're going to try to design and test a possible solution for it. You're going to learn about what works most effectively and what doesn't work very well, and then you're going to improve the design. This concept of iteration and continuously experimenting and improving on the design is really how you get to the best and most efficient solution. And engineers are always striving to improve on the design they make and make it more efficient. So this kind of this logical problem solving process is a way that engineers start to tackle problems. And where do we start? The first place is defining the problem. So we know that Grover's disease does not really have an effective treatment. And we know that blue light therapy may prevent a solution. It may prevent an effective option. So our problem is to design a treatment for Grover's disease using blue light technology. So where do we go from here? We need to research more about Grover's disease and the treatments that are currently used. What are the options and what are their pros and cons? Other biomedical engineers and researchers have tried to come up with treatments for Grover's disease in the past. One possible treatment is steroid creams and antihistamines. Doctors keep trying different creams to see what might work effectively. The creams seem to work well to control itching, but they don't really get to the underlying cause. So it's not necessarily an ideal solution. Another approach, another therapy is sunlight therapy, which does appear to have some benefits at treating Grover's disease. However, we all know that too much sunlight can aggravate the skin and thus aggravate the condition. We also know we've got to be careful about limiting our exposure to ultraviolet light, which can damage our skin. There's also the problem that in the winter months, you don't get that much sunlight, so it's not an effective year-round therapy. Some patients are prescribed vitamin D3 supplements, but you have to be careful when you're taking a vitamin D3 supplement, and you have to have frequent blood tests to monitor that you don't have too much vitamin D in your system. So let's think about that. The sunlight option appears to have some positive benefits, but could we come up with a treatment that provides the right amount of light, but not the damaging UV radiation? That's where blue light possibly presents a treatment option. Another important piece of the research that we need to look at today is the study of the body's, how does the body's immune system respond to light therapy? The immune response is regulated by the thymus gland. This is a gland located in your chest cavity, kind of right in front of your heart. And it is the sort of the director of the immune system. It directs the response to bacteria, viruses, inflammation, kind of the supervisor. The thymus gland, like many of our organs, starts to shrink and, well, starts to degrade as we get older. If you recall, our patient and our subjects generally are affected by Grover's disease when they're a little bit older, over 40. So interestingly, it also turns out that light stimulates the thymus gland, which boosts our immune system. So again, we've got another tip leading towards light being an effective therapy. If we go back to look at a typical patient with Grover's disease, the patient generally has the disease more in the winter months than in the summer months. One particular patient plays golf outside or does outdoor activities quite frequently. A round of golf will last for about 5 hours. And generally they find that this patient finds that the rash goes away in the summer months when the person is spending more time outdoors. So if we could figure out how to come up with a treatment that replicates this light exposure of 5 hours outside in the sun, we might have an effective treatment. Why is it an effective treatment? Well, it turns out that sunlight increases the efficiency of our T cells, which are a subtype of white blood cells that help fight infection. All white blood cells are made in the bone marrow. And while some mature there, T cells travel through the bloodstream to the thymus gland and they mature there. They then circulate through the bloodstream until they're needed and move to the site of infection to orchestrate an immune response. Studies have found that sunlight activates these T cells and makes them 300 times faster and ultimately boosts the immune system by a factor of 7 or 8 times. And interestingly, researchers have also discovered that the particular wavelength of light that stimulates the response the most is blue light. In the midday sun, the patient is exposed to lots of different wavelengths of light, but scientists have determined that blue light seems to be the most effective. And isn't that good news for us engineers? Because blue light is lower frequency than ultraviolet light and will not damage our skin in the same way as ultraviolet light does. And speaking of light, let's learn just a bit more. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about light, what it is, and the various wavelengths in the electromagnetic spectrum. So you know that sun is good for you, but you also know it's capable of damaging your skin. You know, we need vitamin D, which we can get by being out in the sun, but too much time leads to a sunburn. And of course, how much time you spend in the sun depends on what time of year it is and where you are on the globe, and what types of clothing you wear and whether you wear sunscreen. The reason for this is because sunlight is a mixture of electromagnetic waves ranging from the ultraviolet, being the highest frequency, to infrared, which is the lowest frequency light waves in the bigger, broader electromagnetic spectrum. Visible light is just a small part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which includes everything from low frequency radio waves, like our telephones use like we use to communicate with our telephones, to higher frequency X-rays used in medical imaging, to very, very high frequency gamma rays that we only see in the deep spaces and in the deep reaches in space. So every part of that spectrum, though, of radiation is the same. It's light, photons of energy. Humans can only see a very narrow band of this whole big range, but we can see other parts of the spectrum using telescopes tuned for a particular frequency, infrared or X-ray, etc. And just like all radiation in the spectrum, the components of light differ in their penetrating ability and their biological effect on the body. The visible spectrum is defined by wavelengths from 100 to 700 nanometers. Again, those are very small amounts, but it's also important to remember that as the wavelength of light decreases, the energy and frequency of the light increases. If you're wondering or need a reference of what a nanometer is, a reminder, that's 1 billionth of a meter. And for comparison, a human hair is the thickness of 100,000 nanometers. So we're dealing with very, very tiny measurements. But understanding the energy of radiation is related to its frequency, helps us see why UV radiation, which is higher frequency than blue light, can be more damaging to our skin. The higher the frequency, the higher the energy quantity in the photons of light, and the more penetrating and damaging that particular light can be, that particular type of radiation can be for on our skin. So, are doctors the only professionals that think about the impact of sunlight on the body? I think it's clear that the answer is no, because we've been discussing how biomedical engineers can use this information to develop medical treatments. Electrical engineers and manufacturers are using their understanding of light to look at photovoltaic systems and light sensitive protective material. So there's many applications for the study of looking at light and its impact on humans. Your your student workbook is going to have instructions for an experiment with a small piece of photochromic paper, where you're going to expose the paper to light and see how its color changes in response to various kinds of radiation. In the absence of that light, this paper, this photochromic paper, should revert back to its original state. So any part of the paper that is blocked from sunlight or by obstructions, such as a hand, will not change color. And you can kind of play around with that a little later in your workbook. So let's look at, with an understanding now of light, let's look a little bit at the concept of irradiance. I want to help you understand this a little bit more, because you're going to do some calculations in your workbook a little bit later. You don't have to do the math right now, but I want you to gain a bit of familiarity with it when you see the problem later. So we know that energy from the sun, which comes in the form of light and heat, is a form of radiant energy. It's part of this broader electromagnetic spectrum. We sometimes look at the flow of this radiant energy as, we call it flux, the amount of flux. And we look at that flux over a unit area, an area of space. So this flux per unit area is known as irradiance. The sun's irradiance on surfaces depends on the angle from the sun to that surface. So factors like the time of day and location on Earth can change that irradiance level. There are lots of reference tables that publish standardized values of irradiance based on location on the planet. And you are going to be using a reference value of a summertime value, June 15th, in the northeastern United States. That average value is 1,060 watts per square meter. So you're probably familiar with watts, a unit of power or a unit of energy per second. And this is looking at that energy per second flowing from the sun over a surface area. So you are going to use the equation that you can see on the slide in bold at the bottom to calculate the sun's irradiance on a square surface. This is how you would calculate it. You're going to look at the irradiance per square meter times the area over which that you're examining, and then the duration in hours of the day that that sun is shining on it. So if we look at the example of a household roof, a 15 meter by 10 meter household roof that experiences 10 hours of sunlight, you can see we would have an irradiance that I told you before, that reference value, 1,060 watts per square meter, times the area of the roof, which would be, it's a square area, so 15 by 10, and then times 10 hours, the number of hours the sun's shining. And what we get is 1,590,000 watt hours, or 1,590 kilowatt hours. If you want to think about a watt hour, it's again simply a measure of energy. I expect you probably are using joules in your science class. So if you want to think of a joule as a watt second, then you can think about a bigger quantity of energy being a watt hour and a much bigger quantity of energy being a kilowatt hour. I hope that puts things into perspective. So what is 1,590 kilowatt hours? To give you a reference example, the average annual electricity consumption for a US residential utility customer was 10,000, almost 11,000 kilowatt hours, which is about 914 kilowatt hours per month. So the quantity that we're talking about is enough to power, enough to power this residential customer for a period of time. Okay, so let's talk just briefly about what blue light is. Blue light, again, is a part of that visible light spectrum, and it's visible to the human eyes. I'm thinking you might have heard about exposure to blue light from like computer and phone screens, and how you should try to limit that because it can mess up your sleep cycles and things like that. But in the case of medical procedures, it can be the fact that it's got a relatively high energy, but is not in the UV portion of the spectrum, makes it an ideal type of light to use in medical therapy. Remember that the sun radiates in all the colors of the visible light spectrum, which is why it appears as white light to us. However, the individual colors or wavelengths of light all make up a percentage of that. And blue light makes up about 7.8% of all the light wavelengths in the visible light spectrum. And if you're wondering, there's an acronym there, AMD, and that's related to kind of too much exposure to these higher frequency wavelengths of light can lead to an age-related macular degeneration. So that's age-related macular degeneration. So you need to be careful about that exposure to, as I said, to that light for long periods of time. But we can control for that in a light therapy. So I know there's a lot of information in this presentation, and I want to remind you again that all of these slides, or many of these slides, will be in your workbook. And be sure to click on some of the speaker symbols if you want to hear an explanation again. There are also some really helpful demonstration videos in the workbook that will help you with this along the way. So don't feel overwhelmed by the information, because you'll see it again in your workbook. So let's look at how we're going to use this irradiance absorbed by the patient as a way to look at treatment. What we want to do is try to replicate 5 hours of time out in the sun, which we know seems to be an effective treatment, or seems to reduce the symptoms of Grover's disease. So in order to calculate the amount of irradiance, the sun's energy that's absorbed, and duplicate that summer sun exposure, we need to calculate we need to estimate the amount of energy you would absorb, sun energy you would absorb by being outside for 5 hours. This will become our treatment goal. And the sun's irradiance in June was recorded to be, as you recall, 1,060 watts per square meter. And we can estimate the human body area to be roughly 2 square meters. That's kind of an assumption. And this person is out in the sun for 5 hours. So that value comes out to be 10,600 watt hours of energy absorbed. So now if we only want to look at what would be the blue light absorbed over that 5 hours, well, remember that the blue light is 7.8% of all of the light in the visible spectrum. So if we take 7.8% of that 10,600, now we're down to 825 watt hours of blue light absorption. And then if we assume that the person was out playing golf with clothing on, a hat, etc., and that some of the sunlight was blocked by trees or the angle of light, etc., we can see that we can estimate that perhaps only 5% of the sun's light was truly absorbed. 75% of it going to be absorbed by the clothes and the hats, etc., and 20% being blocked by trees and other things. So if we take 5% of the 825 hours of blue light absorption, we come up with 41 watt hours. This is the amount of energy absorption we want to try to get in our treatment. So we have the information now. We've got enough information to begin working towards our treatment. We want to try to replicate this kind of absorption of blue light energy to supercharge the T cells. And we want to determine if this blue light will deliver a therapeutic event. We can affect the amount of energy absorbed by adjusting some variables. In the case, those variables are the wattage of the light we use, the distance away that the light is from the patient's skin, and the time spent under the light. It's important to, kind of think about those things. These are the things that we can vary and look at in our treatment plan. In order to determine the wattage, you could consult a solar irradiance table that tells you how much solar energy you're getting in your location. The irradiance varies throughout the year, depending on the seasons, and it also varies throughout the day, depending on the position of the sun in the sky. You'd also need to determine the distance from the light source. Do you want to have it 4 inches away from you or 3 feet away from you? The closer you are to the light source, the more energy you're going to deliver. And then the residence time is how long is the patient going to spend in front of these lights? How long will the treatment be? We need to try to mimic 5 hours of sun exposure artificially through this treatment. So here's what we're going to do. I think we've learned enough information, and now we're ready to kind of think about what you're going to be measuring in the lab and what you're going to be putting together. You are going to use blue light flashlights, which you've got in your kits right here, and photochromic paper. And you're going to determine the ideal treatment method for our patient with Grover's disease. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your blue light and hold it. Let me just pull it out and hold it above the photochromic paper. And there's a demo in your book. Hold it above the paper surface, and you're going to cause the photochromic paper to change color. And that is going to tell you the amount of irradiance on the paper. Additionally, you're going to see a circular light area exposed to the paper, and you're going to measure the diameter of that light circle so that you can calculate the area that the skin was exposed to. And then you're going to try to come up with a way to set up an array of lights to expose the patient to what would be equivalent to 5 hours in the sun, 41.34 watt hours. So let's again, let me show you a little bit more of these exact things. So here's a closer look of the flashlight being exposed to the photochromic paper. And you can see when the flashlight shines on it, you want to be careful to try to always control the amount of time you shine the light on the paper. Try to maintain that at 10 seconds. And you'll see the paper changes color. And then you'll use a comparison chart that you have in your student notebook to get an irradiance value. So you can see there's different colors here, and you'll estimate the irradiance value. The other thing that you're going to do is measure the area of the circle that is swept out by the light at these different distances above the paper. And so here you'll probably want to take a ruler and measure the light circle while you're exposing the light, the photochromic paper. Then you'll use the equation for the area of a circle, pi r squared, to find the area. Please, because we're dealing in irradiance values in watts per meter squared, please pay attention to your units. You might make a measurement in inches, but you'll want to make sure that you convert that radius measurement in inches to meters so that you can calculate it in square meters. You can also measure it in centimeters and then divide by 10,000 to get meters squared. Again, there's an example of this in your workbook. So you're going to do this for 3 different measurements. You're going to calculate those values and measure the irradiance. And then you're going to chart that. You're going to look at a chart of that. And it might look something like this. You should definitely see that as the distance away from the paper increases, the irradiance value decreases. And you should also find that as the distance away from the paper increases, the area swept out by the light increases. What are you going to do with that information? You're going to, you should have some brown paper in your packet. And you're going to cut out a rough model of a human silhouette on the paper. And then you're going to experiment with how you could set up a light array over the patient's torso in order to best provide this light therapy treatment. So you can see here, there's 3 pictures. One would be with the lights very close to the patient, sweeping out a small area, one sort of in between, and one where you've got the light quite far away, so you're sweeping out a big area. And don't forget that the patient is going to be treated on his front and his back. So multiply the number of lights that would be needed by 2 to get both the front and the back of the patient. And let me see, what else can I tell you? There's going to be kind of an optimum, you and your team will kind of work on the optimum combination of number of lights and treatment time. You're going to find probably that the lights, when they're closer to the patient, are going to provide lots of irradiance and allow for a very short time in a treatment apparatus, but might also be quite expensive because you're going to have to, you're going to be having to buy lights as an engineer. This piece of equipment is going to be more expensive the more lights you need. So you're probably going to find that you'll have to talk back and forth with your team about an optimum approach. But what you're going to do to figure out the treatment time in the bed, you're going to, in this light therapy apparatus, you're going to take your irradiance absorption that you measured with the photochromic paper, and you're going to take the area of the light circle that you've calculated for that particular distance away from the paper, and that value, those values will be divided into the 41 watt-hour target energy absorption. And using that, we'll come up with the hours that are needed in the bed, in the apparatus. And that will tell you kind of how long the patient will need to stay. The target should be less than an hour. This patient is probably going to have to be exposed to this treatment every day to control their Grover's disease. So you don't want to have to spend too much time in a bed. But as I said, you're going to have a kind of a discussion with your team about the optimum number of lights and the cost of the apparatus. And that's the last slide. How much will it cost? You're going to have a certain dollar amount for each slide, and you'll see the dollar amount for each light, and you'll see the dollar amount in your workbook. And you'll probably find that there's one that's kind of a happy medium of the two. And I'll leave that up to you, and we'll discuss that. I can't wait to hear about what you come up with as we get to the wrap up this afternoon. You're going to have about 45 minutes to work with your team on the lab. And engineering students are going to be online should you have any questions along the way. And I guess I'll just finish for now saying, I hope you have so much fun today. It's been such a pleasure to introduce this to you. And I really look forward to hearing some of your conversations that you have during the day when we meet up again at the wrap up. Thank you very much and have so much fun.
I want to say thank you, Joanna, for a wonderful intro. I hope that you guys have all the information you need so that you're ready to roll with this lab. And I'm going. Well, I want to say welcome back to everybody. I hope that you guys use our breakout rooms if you had any questions. And if not, we're here. This is your Q&A session, and this is your opportunity to ask questions. And we have some amazing mentors who are here to lead the session. We have Sarah and Anna, and I'm not going to do any more talking. I want them to take it away, but I just want you to remember this is your session. This works really well when you guys have questions and are engaged. So please do not hesitate to type your questions in chat for our amazing mentors who are here to lead. And I'm going to pass it off to Sarah to introduce herself and officially start our Q&A session.
Hi, so good morning, guys. Thank you, Monica. I'd like to apologize in advance. I'm kind of under the weather, but we're going to get this started and we're going to have a good time. So hi, guys. My name is Sarah. I'm a junior at MIT majoring in biological engineering and management. I've been engaged in various forms of biological research for the past, 6 years, ever since I was a freshman in high school. And I've kind of dabbled in everything from making biofertilizers to combat climate change, to investigating how bacteria talk, to using stem cells to make new cell therapies. So I think what we're going to do is I'll share a few slides about myself to give you guys some more background in what it is that I do, and then I'll pass it over to Anna and she'll do the same. So here we go. Can people see this? Yes.
Looks
No.
great.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so real quick, again, I've been with Engineering Tomorrow for a few years now, and my main interest in engineering kind of feature around using immunotherapy, harnessing your own immune system to tackle complex diseases like cancer, or if you guys have heard of the COVID vaccines, that sort of thing. So real quick about my background, I have done a bunch of independent research in high school. And this was kind of what I like to call my freelance research era, where I kind of would just come up with an idea that was inspired by a local challenge that I saw. So for example, one time I noticed that this pond that I had, that was around since my childhood had started, had kind of erupted in this harmful algal bloom that had killed all the fish within the pond. So I wanted to do something to kind of get rid of this algae and restore the ecosystems. That was my project for a couple of years in high school. And then when I got to MIT, I moved into a more, I guess you could say, sophisticated research lab where I was investigating how bacteria talk to one another to exchange genetic material and get new traits like antibiotic resistance. And then last summer, I interned at a biotech company called CRISPR Therapeutics, where I used regenerative medicine or stem cells, and I can talk about that later on if anyone's interested, to treat complex diseases like diabetes and cancer. And now I'm doing an internship at a venture creation firm called Aegis Ventures, where I'm basically starting healthcare companies. I'm looking at what are the problems in healthcare, and I'm trying to start new companies to address those problems. So recap, started in my basement doing kind of sketchy research about problems that were interesting to me. And then I moved into the back of my biology classroom where I started investigating those problems in more detail. Moved to MIT, got to this very nice, snazzy building, and then ended up at CRISPR. So my journey has been long, it's been fun, happy to discuss more about it later on. But Anna, I'll pass it to you.
Great, thank you. I'm also going to share some slides that I have. Let's see. Okay. All right, so my name's Anna. I'm a junior at the University of Notre Dame. I'm studying electrical engineering, and I have a minor in bioengineering. So currently I'm a college mentor for Engineering Tomorrow, and last summer I actually interned with them. So over the summer, I created the Renewable Energy Lab and an extension activity for the Embedded Systems Lab. So if you're interested, definitely check those out. In terms of my interests, I'm interested in biomedical devices, medical electronics, basically the electrical side of the healthcare industry of medical devices. And some things I'm doing now include undergraduate research in biomedical photonics. And in terms of my timeline, so in high school, I actually didn't really do anything engineering. And that's for a multitude of reasons. I went to a large inner city public school. We didn't have any engineering courses, which is why I love Engineering Tomorrow and programs like this that allow students to have engineering opportunities where they might not be able to access it. So that's why I love this company so much. And in high school, I was actually interested in business and I was in a finance program, but I was also very interested in bio. So I was kind of in the business, bio, doctor realm. And then I eventually landed on engineering. I loved the functionality of it, the practicality of it. And now I'm here and I'm loving it. So I'd like to share some projects that I've really enjoyed while I've been in college. I took a biomedical devices course. So here you can see, I made an EMG and an EKG. So what an EMG is it measures the electrical pulses from your arm. So you could see I have these electrodes on my arm. And then when I flex my wrist, you could see that there were these pulses in that signal over here. And the way that I did that is with this circuit that I designed, I created a biopotential amplifier. It's basically measured from my arm, amplified those signals because they're actually pretty weak, and then sent it to my computer where I used code to filter out the noise, which is basically like the garbage of the signal, like not the true signal. And then I displayed it on my screen. I also designed a PCB, which is a printed circuit board, like those green circuit boards that I'm sure you all have seen. And then another way I applied this is with the same circuit, I connected it to my chest, two here, and then one on the side of my rib. And this video is actually my heartbeat that I got to measure and record. So this is a project that kind of illustrates that connection of electrical engineering and biomedical engineering, and one that I really enjoyed. And then so what I'm up to now is I'm in a club that I really love called Enable. And we 3D print hands for people who need them. So down here, this purple hand was for a 6-year-old, and she had a transradial limb difference. So she didn't have an arm below her elbow. So we created this for her. It's an elbow actuated arm. You could see a little bit in this video of how it works. So this one is wrist actuated. So you bend the wrist and the hand can close. And the way that we made it for her is that she can bend her elbow and the hand will close. And up here is a more recent one I did. This was for a 29-year-old. It's a bit bigger. But the issue was her residual limb was pretty small. So she didn't really have enough leverage to bend it. So what I'm doing now is I'm leading a team to make a myoelectric arm, which uses the EMG that I talked about in the last slide and takes those signals, and depending on how strong it is, can close that hand. And then the other side of what I'm doing is biomedical photonics research. So I included some images that I took from my lab, and that's combining fluorescence microscopy lifetime imaging, which basically is you're in a dark room, you shoot a bunch of photons at something, and those are just like particles of light. And depending on the type of cell it is, it will have a different lifetime. So it will take the light, absorb it, and then take some time to reflect it. And here the color coding shows how long that lifetime is, and it's a way to differentiate parts of cells. And also using multiphoton microscopy, which is, again, you're in a dark room and you shoot 2 photons at a sample. And the way that that works is photons are really small. So the probability of them colliding is small unless you make it collide at a certain point that you want. And then energy is released and light is sent back up to the microscope. And that is what you image, which allows you to image the inside parts of cells, and you don't have to do a biopsy. So like, for example, we imaged a mouse brain and you don't have to cut anything out. You could do it while it's living and you could see the inside of a mouse brain. So that's kind of the stuff that I'm doing. If you guys want to ask any questions about that, and with that, I'm gonna let you guys ask your questions for me and Sarah.
All right, everybody on the line, this is your opportunity. Please do not be shy.
Yeah, you can put questions in chat and you can just ask us anything about our engineering experience, what we've done in college, any of the awesome projects that Anna just talked about. Because I know I have questions because that stuff was super cool. But before I start, asking questions, I want to give you guys a chance. You can also share some fun pictures about some projects we've done. I've got some stuff. Anna showed you guys some stuff.
While they're
This is
typing.
John High School. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so
Go ahead.
we have some students. We really appreciated seeing what the students did in high school so that they kind of some of them are interested also in starting independent research projects. They're also wondering, however, the type of AP courses that they took in high school that better prepare them or gave them a better experience in college. Maybe, so just some suggestions.
Yeah, sure. We can talk about that. Anna, do you want to start or should I?
Yeah, sure, I can start. So like I said, I didn't really do any research in high school or anything like engineering, but I did take AP classes. So I took kind of like the baselines that prepare you for engineering. I was particularly interested in the bio side. So I took AP Bio, AP Physics, AP Calc, just get those baselines in high school. And then Sarah can speak more to, doing your own research and getting into that.
Yeah, real quick to touch on APs, I feel like I took too many. You don't want to, I think it's good to take AP classes because it lets you become more enriched in the subjects that you want to learn more about. So for example, I really liked biology and I thought that AP biology was a really good stepping stone. And now that I'm in college, I know how helpful that intro biology was in high school. I could do much more sophisticated research after taking that class. So definitely if you're interested in a class, see if there's an AP version of it, but don't just take a bunch of them for the sake of taking them like I did. That was a lot of work. And then as for research in high school, it's not like I did research in an actual lab during high school for a lot of years. It was mostly just I would come up with an idea and I would try to solve it. So I know a lot of you guys have done science fair. I was really into that when I was in high school. And I'll give you an example. When I was in sophomore year, I did some research on biofertilizers, and I wanted to see if I could make a new biofertilizer to combat climate change. So reduce atmospheric CO2 while making the plant grow more. And what I did to test this was I kind of did some research. I stumbled upon this bacteria called cyanobacteria, and I thought, okay, well, maybe this bacteria will help my plants grow better. And I literally went to Target. I bought a bunch of bins from Target. I cut holes in them so I'd be able to measure the CO2 levels in them. I outfitted them with these self-watering systems that were basically just Tupperware with cotton wicks in them to water my plants. Since I couldn't touch them, and I did it in my basement with an overhead light. So it wasn't super sophisticated research, in a lab or anything, but it was the kind of research that I wanted to ask. Now, if you're interested in research in a lab, you can always reach out to a professor at a nearby university, which is what I did in senior year, because I just needed more equipment. And you can say, oh, I'm interested in this. Do you mind talking to me a little bit? And you'll be surprised. Professors love talking about their research. The one thing that people in research love doing most is talking about their research. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Yeah, I think the first question in the chat is for you, Anna.
Yeah, so it says electrical impulses on our body are not clean signals due to the different tissues, and what could you do to isolate the clear signal without the background noise? So the way that I did this is in my actual physical circuit, I use something called an operational amplifier. So what that does is it amplifies that signal, so it makes the amplitude of it higher. but it also kind of regulates it. So anything that is things that wouldn't be clean, like the spikes, it kind of regulates it using a feedback loop. I'm not going to get like super into that, but that's kind of how it stabilizes the signal. And then I send it to my computer where I mentioned that I applied a filter on it. So what it was actually a low pass filter, which means that it takes the lower frequencies of that signal. So it blocks out noise and it blocks out interference with things like the 60 hertz noise that's just constantly in a room from all of the electrical stuff in a room, like power outlets and everything. So that's how I did it with things called an op amp and using filtering and code with my signal. And then moving on to the next question of how do you manage your time with all the coursework and living your life?
Question.
Yeah, that is definitely something you have to figure out. When you get to college, your time management skills are going to grow a lot. The way that I approach it is just very organized, like very analytical. I know some people who block out times and like Google Calendar of, okay, I'm gonna work on this during this part of the day and then this on this part of the day, which I don't do, but is something you could try. It's honestly just not getting overwhelmed with your work, planning it out, and then allowing yourself the free time that you need. Like I know someone who's also an electrical engineer. In my year, he's a junior and he has a hard rule, like no work on Saturdays. And he's doing completely fine because he prioritizes that time. He prioritizes the weekend and time to relax. So it's kind of just taking your work, organizing it, prioritizing your time, and being efficient with the time that you do have to work. Sarah, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think it's a trial and error process. Depends on how you know yourself and like what your learning style is. So like I'm a very visual learner. I know that if I put something in my Google Calendar, I'm not going to look at it because it's not staring me in the face all the time. So I know what some people do is they'll take sticky notes and they'll put it on their laptop. So if there's something that they really have to do, like it needs to get done, they'll just put it right there. So that every time you open your laptop, you want to watch Netflix or something, it's there. And then what I do is I have all these sticky notes on my wall. I write all my assignments on them. And I kind of just will move them to different parts of my wall depending on how much progress has been done. So by the end of the week, I've got all my sticky notes on the right side of my wall. And I'm like, wow, look at how much I've accomplished. So if you're a very visual learner, I would recommend doing something like that. But if you're like, more of a, like a different kind of person, you can kind of just block out time on your calendar or just try different strategies, see what works best for you. Okay, how did you come up with ideas for projects to pursue? Okay, yeah, I think that's for me. But Anna, you can add on to it if there's anything else. When I was in high school, the way that I would come up with ideas, I would kind of just look at what problems were around me and try and solve them. And then as I got older, it evolved into more trying to solve problems that would best benefit humanity. So it's like a really deep thing to say. But when I was in high school, the reason that I started off with plants is actually because my mom was super into gardening and she was having trouble having her plants grow more. So every spring she would like put in all this effort and all her plants would just die out. So I decided that I would try to make some fertilizer to help her plants grow better, but I didn't want to mess up our soil in the process. I wanted it to be a good, environmentally friendly fertilizer. So that's kind of where the climate change combating fertilizer came from. And then like the next year, that's where my algal bloom project came from. It simply came from the fact that I saw a problem in my local community. My pond had been overtaken by algae and I wanted to fix it. And then when I got older, after doing all of these mini projects, you kind of get to understand that there are things that you like to investigate. So like when I was doing these algae stuff, I learned more about bacteria. I learned more about cyanobacteria. I thought, this is kind of interesting. I kind of want to learn more about it. So then when I got to college, I joined a microbiology lab. I learned a lot about bacteria. I learned a lot about how they work and how they talk and how they exchange DNA and all these cool things that they do. And then I was like, okay, well, now that I've learned all of this about bacteria, I kind of want to learn more about I don't know this. I want to learn more about human cells. So then I joined CRISPR and I did all that kind of stuff. So it's not like you start out with this idea like, oh, I want to make a allogeneic cell therapy to combat like blood cancer in the, like it's, or like, it's not like you start out with that really sophisticated idea. You start out with a simple idea, and your experience evolves and it builds upon itself until you end up with an idea that you're really passionate about investigating. Have you started to think about your career, future? What fields are you planning to investigate and pursue? I think Anna, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So for me in my career, I want to go into the biomedical device industry. And there are a lot of different paths you can take through that. So for me, I think I would prefer going straight into industry from undergrad as opposed to getting a graduate degree or getting a master's. And then, so fields you were investigating pursue. So yeah, I'm also interested in the biomedical photonics because of my research. That's a possibility for me to explore this summer. It's kind of just, I'm in a phase of testing out exactly where I want to be. Like, I know what I want to do. I know how I want to help. I know how I want to give back, but it's kind of determining how exactly I'm going to do that. So for me, my career, what it looks like is me going into industry, testing out what I like, trying different things, getting that professional experience, and then going forward from there.
Yeah, so you can see it's a really individual path. You kind of get, you gotta get to spend the 4 years that you're in college deciding what you want to do. For me, right now, I'm leaning more towards going to graduate school and getting a PhD. But either path is totally valid and either path is totally fine. Like a year ago, I was like, I really would hate getting a PhD. And now I'm like, kind of, maybe I would like it. Maybe I would like kind of being able to immerse myself in a problem for a few years. So it's kind of dynamic and it takes a long time to figure out what you want to do for your career. And even when you make a decision, those decisions are not solidified. They're always flexible. Like there are very few decisions in life that when you make them, they are irreversible. Very few. Like if I decide that I want to go into industry after undergrad, and I later decide that I want to go back to grad school, I can apply to PhD programs when I'm 26 versus when I'm 22. So don't let it stress you out too much. I know I did. But what extra activities are you doing at MIT, such as extra clubs? Okay, yes. I'm part of a few clubs. I also do some things outside. I know Anna does some things outside of class too. She told you guys a little bit about the research that she does and that other club that she's in. I also do research at MIT. I'm currently not because I'm interning at a company. But I did part-time research on bacteria for a few years, and now I am working more on the business side of things at this venture capital firm in New York City, where we kind of work with this healthcare system to identify problems in the system and then spin out solutions to address those problems. So that takes up quite a bit of my time outside of classes. I'm also part of the MIT Biotech Group. We do a lot of, we organize a lot of events with the biotech community near Boston. If you guys don't know, Boston and San Francisco are like the biotech hubs of the United States. They have a bunch of companies, like Moderna's here, Pfizer's here, all of the big like pharma companies are here, all the big biotechs are here. So you get a lot of opportunities to kind of interact with people that have pursued the career paths that you're interested in pursuing. So that's another thing that I would say is like a good testing the waters thing. When you get to college, be sure to talk to a lot of people. Talk to professors, talk to people who are in industry, just shoot them an email and ask them questions about themselves and their career paths. And you'll learn a lot about yourself and what you want to do outside of college from doing that. And then I think this question was directed towards MIT, but I think it can be all universities. You can talk about it too. What types of extra academic support resources do universities have to help you like with your studies? Anna, do you want to talk about it first? Then I can give some pointers.
Yeah, sure. I mean, every university is going to have a ton of resources for you. They want you to succeed, like they're there to help you. I know that we have like a writing center, we have a math help room, we have just overall tutoring. Like there are many, many resources. One that I'm using a lot now is the Career Center. There are so many events that they hold, so many things to explore. I mean, it's going to be unique to your university, but there's definitely like, if you need help, you can find it. It's just about like putting in that work and looking online and trying to find what's available to you.
Yeah, most colleges have writing centers, they have career centers, they have tutors. One thing that I'm pretty sure every school has, but not everyone uses, is office hours, like professors' office hours. Usually TAs or people who are teaching your class will host a few hours a week where they're just there to talk to you and answer your questions about the class. And I know when I was a freshman, I was like, why would I want to go sit in a room with my professors alone for a while and like ask them questions? But it is actually extremely helpful for getting your homework done. Because there was times when I would start my homework and I would have no idea what was going on. And I would go to my professor's office hours with a few of my friends and we would just ask them like, oh, is like we would ask them to clarify concepts that they talked about in class, and it completely changed like my worldview. I remember when I was in physics too, I really struggled with like, or I don't even know, when I was in physics, my first semester at MIT, I really struggled with torque. Like if you guys have done physics before, I really struggled with torque and angular momentum and I had no idea what was going on. I went to one office hour with my professor and he cleared up everything for me. I never struggled with it again. That's like an extreme example, but it can definitely help you out. Just don't be afraid to put yourself out there and ask for help when needed. So if you need a tutor, get a tutor. It's not embarrassing. Like I got a tutor for organic chemistry. It was the best thing I ever did.
Are there any last questions out there? I think you covered all the questions that were in the chat, but this is your opportunity. We have about 3 minutes. I know that they're working hard on their lab because they have to wrap it up soon. But if there's any last questions for Sarah or Anna, please hop in there. And if not, I want to say thank you to Sarah and Anna for leading such a great session. Thank you to everybody for putting such great questions in the chat. These mentors have amazing backgrounds and stories to share with us. And so I'm glad they got to share and motivate and inspire you all today. I'm going to pause the recording.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I hope you've been having fun experimenting, taking some measurements, collecting data, and starting to think about the array of lights that might be the optimum choice for your particular team. I guess I kind of want to start there, and I want to start and hear if you've had any questions. What are some things that you've come up against as you've started this? Feel free to unmute or type something in the chat if you'd like. Are there any questions that you're starting to see? Or have you already started to collect some data and would like to present your design?
I see a lot of work going on at Wall Trip. I see a lot of work going on at All Hallows. We'd love to hear your feedback. Please do not be shy. You can unmute or type in chat. And for those of you that don't have your cameras on, please feel free to turn your cameras on and show us how it's going today. We'd love to see your work. I see Preston High School just turned on their camera. Oh, hi there, Preston. Let's see. Anybody have any feedback? Anything they want to share with our engineer? Hi, ladies.
Have you been able to get to the point where you've been starting to think about the positioning of your lights on your subject? Does anybody want to hold up their piece of paper, their cutout of a human and how they might be presenting that? Oh, great, Preston. I like the look of that. We got lots of designs going. I'm sure you didn't have a whole lot of time, so I'm sure you're still very much in the thick of things. Have you had any roadblocks that you've come along with equipment or with measurement or anything like that that we can help to troubleshoot? St. Peter's Boys is saying that they found at a height of 4 inches, maybe they liked, maybe St. Peter's is saying that they like that particular height as their optimum choice. "15 minutes of exposure needed." Great. So that would be a very efficient treatment. Now, was that just for one front half of a person, or was that for both the front and the back? That is a great result. Oh, but expensive. An expensive machine if you had to buy one. Now you're starting to see very clearly the struggle, the challenges that an engineer faces, an engineering team faces, and trying to optimize both the efficiency and effectiveness of a device or something that they're building with the costs remaining in a budget. Do we have any really low budget options out there? And what is the time required in the in your light therapy apparatus? Waltrip, are you, I think maybe you are talking. I can't quite tell. Okay. Waltrip, shall I give you a minute? I can go on. St. Peter's Boys is asking, is there an expected answer? No, there's not an expected answer. But I think what you're finding is you're seeing very clearly that trade-off between number of lights and cost. I think we've been finding that, you know, between 4 and 6 inches does yield a pretty nice result. So I think Waltrip, you said you found between 40 and 80 dots worked best, 40 to 80. You want to try to keep time in the machine. I would say you're working with a criteria. A limitation is to try to limit the time of the therapy to under an hour. So that helps kind of ballpark the cost or get you within a range of the number of lights. Did anybody, I know there hasn't been a whole lot of time, but did anybody want to comment on? We found another group found 232 bulbs.
See, seems that we have some very expensive treatment options out here, Joanna.
We do. We do. And, you know, I think if you're really trying to optimize time in the machine and keep that down, it's just like anything else. You could probably buy the Cadillac light therapy machine, and you can probably buy the I don't know, the budget car therapy machine, and the time in the machine is going to be the cost differentiator. Can I ask what, as you worked in your teams, what went well today? Did you find that you started to coalesce around an idea or a particular approach? Did you find that you split up the activities pretty well in your team? Somebody focused in on the calculations, somebody focused in on the setup of the light spots. Can anybody comment on that? Because for me, the collaborative aspect of the work that you're doing today is a very good model of what engineers do all the time when they're solving problems.
I think somebody at Waltrip is typing. Waltrip, do you want to unmute and just chat with us? Don't be shy.
We would love that.
Hi, sorry. We were had announcements going on, so trying to not blast your ears out. We all worked together really well, and we were helping each other as a group with things that we didn't understand. So even though we had different kind of teams based on tables, we would still go to each other's tables and help each other.
That's fantastic. And so it sounds like you also had a little bit of time to iterate as well. Like you could sort of see what one group is doing and learn a bit from what they were doing and then apply that to your personal team, things like that, which is very much an aspect of working in a team on a project, etc. Thank you very much for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Way to go, Waltrip. Did anybody find some limitations with equipment and then had to quickly kind of pivot or share amongst groups? You probably have all been hearing about supply chain shortages and the struggles of supply chain. And that's something that engineers really have had to work and brainstorm new approaches based on access to equipment and goods for projects that they're working on. Well, I'm going to let you keep working a little bit, and I'm going to start to share my screen and just talk a little bit more about what are some other ways that light therapy is being used. So I think I got it. Okay, so here's some of the questions that I've been asking you, and feel free to jump in if a question pops into your head. But I'm gonna continue on with a little bit more of some other ways light therapy is being used. Here's a slide that tells you kind of an example of what different types of engineers in this field of working with light can earn and the types of things they're doing. So a photonics engineer works on improving systems that disperse light or use photons such as lasers and fiber optics or imaging systems. If you like today's lab and are interested in studying how light works, or how we can use light for society and for a common good, that could be photonics engineering. If you are, it's kind of looking at a more mechanical engineering aspect of light. If you're interested in kind of being a part of the green revolution as our power infrastructure transforms to renewable energy, you could look into being perhaps a solar energy engineer and really trying to make solar power one of our primary power sources in the country. And then you heard from some of our amazing engineering interns, the kind of work that they're doing as biomedical engineers. So we received a question in advance of this presentation that talks about, is it hard to pursue an engineering degree? And I'm going to stay on this slide because you can see that an amazing benefit of pursuing an engineering degree is you basically have a job right out of college. After 4 or 5 years of college, you will be heavily recruited in the engineering sector. But that means you're doing a lot in a concentrated amount of time to be ready for that professional position at the end. And so I think what I would say to answer this question is an engineering degree is a challenging degree to earn because you're going to be quite busy. Your semesters are going to be packed. I know you heard from some of the engineering interns about time management and things like that. Something that really was important to me as I went into engineering school was that I found a team of students that I also collaborated with as we shared classes together. And so we started to really work together to work on problem sets, to work on projects together. And I highly recommend that. Continue to work on these teams, building skills, these collaboration skills, because they are so important as you move on to college, no matter what field you're looking at, but particularly the engineering field. So let's see. What you did today was you came up with a proposal for phototherapy that would mimic what a human would experience if they were out in the sun for 5 hours a day. And what you've done is created, hopefully, a fairly efficient and cost-effective way to use blue light as a treatment of this disease, of Grover's disease. I know you're still collecting data and you're still finalizing things, but I'm hoping that you are ultimately going to come up with a solution that you're proud of and that you feel comfortable with. The gentleman, Mr. Woodburn, who you're going to hear from at the end of our presentation today, is the developer of this technology. And he actually got a patent to patent his proposed blue light therapy machine. A patent, what is a patent? It's a type of intellectual property that gives the owner legal right to exclude others from making or using or selling an invention for 20 years in exchange for publishing how the device works, essentially disclosing the mechanics of the invention. So a patent allows the developer of a device to gain the fruits of the development of that device, at least for 20 years. But in doing so, also shares the intellectual understanding with the public. How is that different from, how is a patent different from a trade secret? A trade secret essentially derive their legal protection from because they're kept secret. So that might be, the ingredients to your favorite fried chicken recipe, or how do they make Coca-Cola taste so good? In contrast, patents do share how the device works. They share the technical information with the public, with that 20-year protection for the person who owns the patent. I thought you might be interested to know, how is phototherapy being used to treat other skin diseases? And biomedical engineers are looking right now at diseases like psoriasis, eczema, and vitiligo to see if light therapy can be a promising treatment. So, the phototherapy uses light waves to treat certain skin conditions, as we've discussed. And when skin is exposed to ultraviolet light for a set amount of time, phototherapy can use ultraviolet light in these controlled conditions. Sometimes the UV light exposure is also used with a treatment, a medication called Sorolin, and that makes the skin even more sensitive to light. So let me break that down a little bit more. Here are some kind of skin disorders you can see. Here we've got kind of vitiligo, that differentiation and pigmentation. We talked about eczema and psoriasis. Light therapy can be used in that. It can also be used to treat some skin-related cancer symptoms, or it can be used in that. It's used to help if babies are born with jaundice. It can be used to help help the babies get over that condition. And if any of you have ever felt sort of a little down in the winter months, light therapy can also be used for mood and sleep disorders. So there's a number of different healing treatments that light therapy can use. Here's what a type of phototherapy device might look like in real life. And here you see kind of the, you see the different types of wavelengths of light that can be used. So this might be something like what you'd be developing for your patients. The difference between UVB and UVA light, UVA has a longer wavelength, and so it can go deeper beneath the skin. But it's the UV that's associated with skin aging, my wrinkles. UVB has a shorter wavelength, and it's responsible for actually burning our skin. It can't go as deep, but it is responsible for the damage to our skin. Remember that the wavelength of light is proportional to the energy in the is inversely proportional to the energy in the photon of light. So broadband UVB light, which again, UVB is the shorter wavelength, higher energy light, cannot be used in areas where you have skin folds. So you have to be kind of selective in how that is used. Narrow band UVB light has a narrower range of wavelengths, and so it can get into more specified areas. And then PUVA light is a treatment that again uses the medicine Sorolin, which helps make your skin more sensitive to light. The machine you're seeing is a classic phototherapy treatment machine, and you kind of put the exposed areas underneath the blue LEDs, and you expose that area for a period of time. So this might be actually what your device might look like, some arrangement of this. You could see in the patent application, I'll just go back to that, and you can see it kind of looks more like a tanning bed type device that was initially thought of. So I thought you might be also interested in some new technology about how is UV light being used to sterilize different places and to make sure not just killing the coronavirus, but also other bacteria and virus in the area. And there's various types of devices that are being developed using light therapy technology. So before I do that, have any other questions popped up regarding today's challenge? I can see everybody still working away. Please feel free to unmute or put something in the chat as questions come up. I'd love to hear what's going on, but I will quickly play this video so you can see some other technologies that use this light therapy technology.
Now at 5:30, News 6 investigates a new line of defense against the coronavirus, talking about using ultraviolet light.
An advisor with the Department of Homeland Security said just weeks ago that they found the virus dies under the rays. We talked with an Orlando company that specializes in UV, and they say since the pandemic, their business has been booming. News 6's Clay Lepard explains.
Don't be fooled by what you see when you first look inside Serge Albino's trailer. Well, your eye is initially drawn to barren brackets. Turn your attention to what look like oversized smoke detectors. There's quite a bit of power inside each one of them.
You can decontaminate a lot of things in about 15 minutes.
When the doors closed, our camera was rolling. We had to slow it down to capture the UV rays flashing inside, disinfecting everything in sight.
UV absolutely kills coronavirus.
The man behind this technology is Terry Burland, the CEO of Violet Defense, a very busy Orlando-based company.
So we're about 7 times where we were back in February.
He showed us their SAGE units, which stands for Surface Air Germ Elimination.
So now what you'll see is that's the flash. Right? And then in another 6 seconds, there'll be another flash.
You can find them in places like the Amway Center and the Orange County Convention Center.
Those are the kinds of spaces that just no one ever thought about using UV to disinfect them, because no one really ever thought about disinfection as a big thing. Post-COVID, I think the world is going to think about all of that differently.
As for Serge Albino,
We're done. We're ready to start moving this around.
his trailer will mobilize later this week to help Seminole County deputies and firefighters disinfecting their gear.
To start decontaminating their bomb suits, their hazmat gear, and the larger equipment.
In Seminole County, Clay Lepard, Getting Results, News 6.
So another application of this technology.
Now at 5:30,
Right.
News 6 investigates a new line of
Sorry.
defense.
And I thought you'd be interested to see that other engineers have also looked at trying to use this kind of decontaminating technology, but connecting it with robotics. So there's, I believe it's the University of Virginia, engineering students, mechanical engineering students that are trying to combine that technology with robotic technology. So this field is so diverse and so vast, and you can see all the different disciplines of engineering that are working on it. I'm hoping that it might be something, if you're interested in any of these types of engineering, you'll see at the end of your student workbook, you'll see a whole list of things that you could explore further should you wish to find, and if you find any of these things, these topics and these new technologies interesting.
Joanna, there's a question in the chat.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Okay.
It's from a number, so I can't call out the school or the name, but if you want to, how can blue light come from the sun if the sun is yellow? Because the light is blue, but when the sun is yellow, so it can't happen, right?
Oh, I love that question. Okay, so the light that comes from the sun, if you put your face up to the sun, what do you generally feel? You kind of feel the warmth of the sun. And what you're feeling there is the part of the radiant energy from the sun that's in the infrared part of the spectrum. If you're looking at the color, if you're looking at the sunlight, what you see is generally white or yellowish light. And that's because it's made up of all the different wavelengths: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, all those different wavelengths of light. And each of those wavelengths make up a certain percentage of the light that's coming from the sun. So blue light is about 8% of the total energy coming from the sun. You also have UV light coming from the UV radiation coming from the sun, and that's what gives us suntans and also, in my case, sunburn. So that's why you can kind of, what we're trying to do is isolate that, or recognize that that blue light is the most effective in activating the immune system, the thalamus gland. And that's why we chose to focus on that type of light energy. I hope that helps answer your question.
And then I think Ursuline also just shared their treatment plan. If you see that
great.
in chat. Yes, they a little bit
use
pricey
40
too.
lights. We use 40 lights. Instead of creating a bed that requires light for both front and back, we thought it may be good to increase the exposure time, but design the bed to emit light that covers one side of the body, and then you flip over halfway through. Great idea. And then, so 40 lights for $2,000. And how long do you have to spend in the bed, Ursuline? How long do you have to be under the lights, front and back? Calculating now. Okay. I'm wondering too, like maybe there's an effective way if we could think more about like, could you say you want to get under the bed 3 times a week, but for a little longer or something like that? Maybe there's ways to optimize for a person's schedule where they could dial in like the wattage of light and therefore the energy used to make it sort of effective for their schedule. There's so many different variations and ways to optimize this challenge. And I think if you're wondering like how do engineers do this? How do they go about this process? In my case, in the power business, a lot of times what we had to do was we needed to work on a design, and we'd learn from what worked really well in the case of a mechanical engineering system, in the case of a power plant. And then we keep trying to tweak that design to get the ultimate performance out of it. And I think that is a model that relates well to this particular challenge. I'm seeing some great numbers coming in here. $3,000, 60 lights, 48 minutes. Great. So we're starting to see the pricing come down and the time in the bed go up. And so you can start to, you can see this. I feel like 48 minutes, I could probably do that every day if I could, like, you know, have a nice glass of ice water or something there that I could sip on while I was doing it. And if it made my condition better, that seems like a small amount of time to put in. Well, I want to thank you so much to all the schools today for your great participation and for your willingness to jump right in, work as a team. I could see so many from the cameras that I have been able to see. I've seen lots of great teamwork, and I know there's more happening behind the scenes. Most importantly, I hope you really had fun trying out this challenge, and I hope you learned a little bit more about the great field of biomedical engineering. The next person to come up, I'm really excited to introduce Mr. Bill Woodburn today, because he is the founder of Engineering Tomorrow. And he is kind of, his vision and his inspiration is the reason that we're all here. So just to tell you a little bit about Mr. Woodburn, he is a founding member after a storied career with General Electric Corporation. He is a founding member of Global Infrastructure Partners. That is an investment firm that is making, is essentially helping with the development of major energy and infrastructure projects around the world. Things like airports, things like major power plants, big desalination plants. I'm sure he will tell you some more exciting projects as well. And he has been doing that for a number of years. But he also is passionate about making the field of engineering more visible and accessible to high school students. And so he came up with the idea of Engineering Tomorrow and the model as a way to try to get interesting challenges and activities for high school students to do to see how fun engineering is. And so I can't wait for you to learn more from him about what his journey through engineering has been, and particularly his development of the apparatus to help treat Grover's disease. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Bill Woodburn.
Thanks, Joanna. Can everybody hear me? Yes? Okay, great. Thanks for the nice introduction. I'm happy to be here, and good morning or good afternoon to all the students. Given the lecture that you've been giving, Joanna, I think maybe I'll start with talking about the device that I developed and patented, and then go into my background and then go into Q&A. So we'll stick with the device a little bit longer. I think there's an adage that goes back hundreds of years that mother is the necessity of invention, or something like that. What happened with me is I came down with Grover's disease at about the age of 58. And every year it strikes in the wintertime and then goes away in late spring, early summer. And each year it was getting progressively worse. The lesions were getting larger in number. They were more intense in their color and in their inflammation. And maybe the worst thing besides the unsightliness and discomfort was the huge itch. And so the first attempt to deal with it was all kinds of topical creams and lotions and ointments and various other kinds of topical treatments through a host of dermatologists that I went to. The dermatologists didn't know what caused Grover's. They still aren't quite sure, and they don't have a very good cure. Most of what they do is to try and ease the itch and ease the inflammation, but it's transitory and doesn't last very long. So it got to the point where I couldn't sleep at night. The itch was constant, and again, it would go away as summer started. So I started thinking about what might be the linkage here. And one of the things I felt is it had something to do with the sun and being out in the sun that caused it to go away. And it was just a hunch. So one of the things that I think a lot of people are familiar with probably on this call is that sun synthesizes through the skin vitamin D3. So your D3 levels go higher in the summer months because of the synthesis through the skin, and fades in the winter. And I thought, well, maybe my shortage of D3 in the winter, because I'm not in the sun, is behind the Grovers. So I worked with my doctor, my internist, and she would monitor my blood take a blood sample and have a test done every 2 to 3 weeks. And I got my D3 levels up about 7 times normal, which is pretty high. And there was no change in the itch, the inflammation, the number of lesions, etc. So then I was back to what could I do? And the dermatologist said, we think you're going to need to take medicine that deadens your brain's ability to sense itch. Well, that didn't sound very appealing to me. I don't know how it feels for you guys, but I felt, what else is it going to do? What are the side effects going to be? And especially something as complex and as tricky to understand as the brain, I just wasn't comfortable. So I started reading some medical journals and information on the web associated with skin disorders and immune systems. And I stumbled, and it was really stumble, across an interesting article from Georgetown University Med School. And there was a couple of research scientists in the med school that were doing work on T cells. And they were analyzing the impact of different wavelengths of light on mice. Now, why mice? Mice have a similar, this is hard to believe, but have a similar immune system to humans in that they have white blood cells and they have T cells. T lymphocytes is the proper name. It's 2 forms of an immune system, much the same as we humans have, where we have the typical white blood cells, which are called B cells, and they come from the bone marrow of the body. And then we have the T cells, which comes from the thymus gland. The thymus gland is just around the area of the heart, a little bit above it, and it's about the size of a deck of cards. And it's not surprising as you get older and you can watch your grandparents, some of your immune system starts to decline and you're more vulnerable to flu and colds and pneumonia, et cetera. And what happens to the thymus gland is it gets withered over time. And I thought, well, maybe there's something here with my age. I didn't have it before I turned 50. Maybe there's something going on with this T cell immune system, lack of sunlight, lack of blue light in particular. And Joanna's right, it's about 7.8% of the sun's light is in the blue region wavelength. 550 nanometers is the number. So I thought, instead of taking this brain deadening medicine, why don't I develop a light to match the photon absorption that I get in Connecticut where I live in early June when I start to play golf and I'm outside more, sailing and just outside walking and playing golf. So I was able to find some irradiance measures on the web for the town in Greenwich Connecticut where I live, and proceeded to design an LED system that would give me the 5 hours of sun in early June in Connecticut. And I wanted the irradiance level to be high enough that I could treat myself in 20 minutes, 10 on the front and 10 on the back. Why 20? I just thought that was a good number in terms of people would take the time to do it. It's not an hour. And I thought the horsepower required or the wattage required was reasonable and not dangerous. So from your calculations, you know how it works. It's the output in watts per square meter times time that can give you the total irradiance levels. So I could design a wattage system that would be safe and also effective and do it in 20 minutes. So how do I find the diode that we can light up the LED that gives me just blue light? I didn't want UVA, UVB for the reasons Joanna talked about. Cancer is number one. I wasn't so much worried about wrinkles, Joanna. At my age, it's the reality. But I was very careful to think about totally maximizing the energy output of the light system to that of the blue regime, because that was where, when I looked at the curves for mice, that's where the optimal movement of T cell was occurring. And what they were doing is they were measuring the T cell activity moving through the mice. Actually, T cells, when under blue light, can move 200 times faster when not, and they can swim against the flow of the bloodstream. So they're very active. And T cells is a bit like a sports team. They have offensive cells, defensive cells, they have coaches, and they have referee cells. And when it goes out of balance, the referees are failing to do their job. When you can't attack a disease as it enters your body, the attack cells are not doing their job. As you get older, these cells falter and the system can go dysfunctional. What we think is happening with the blue light is it's revitalizing the T cells and causing the system to basically be reharnessed and reactivated. So with the help of a technician, this is not an engineer, this might be somebody with a 2-year degree or somebody just with experience in a lab making LEDs from General Electric, where I used to be an executive in the lighting business in Cleveland, Ohio. I got his help to get a couple of light sources and some drivers. Drivers are the power systems. LEDs require DC, direct current, and I needed a power system to convert AC in the home to DC. So we had this little prototype. I put it on the wall of the basement. I have a funny story, and I'll put the light on in a minute to show you. My wife is very skeptical of all of this, and I had 2 dogs at the time. And my basement door is in the kitchen, and there's about an inch gap between the door and the floor in the kitchen. And I went down and fired up my new device, and I could hear my wife yelling in the kitchen. There's blue light coming up from inside the inside the door, and the dogs are freaking out. It was enough blue light that it covered the entire basement and followed all the way up into spilling into the kitchen through the gap between the door and my wife said she felt it was like the beginning of ET. So it is very blue. I'm going to turn it on. I may have to move my iPad, and you'll have to let me know if it's in a proper position. Can you see Can you see over here where my hand is touching? Okay, these are cooling fins, and these are the LED sources. I have two of these, one on top of the other. This is the higher one. There's one lower. I don't know if you can see the lower one. It's the exact same thing. Each is about 200 watts. It's a lot of power. Can anybody guess how much more efficient an LED is over fluorescent lighting, which is pretty efficient lighting? It's 80% more efficient. So for an LED, the amount of heat it generates is very small relative to the energy it's giving off. 5% of the energy coming off an LED is in heat. The rest is in light. So they're pretty efficient. But the cooling fins are still required because the 5% is still substantial heat. And you can't see it, but I mounted it about 1.5 inches off the wall so that there'd be cooling behind it and not cause any high temperature on the wall itself. I'm going to plug it in now. It'll start right away, and then it'll get bluer over time. When I plug it in, I won't be able to look at it because you can't look at blue light with the naked eye. You need to have protection, and I'll talk about that in a second. Can you see the blue? Yeah, can you see the actual luminaire? Okay. You don't want to stand looking at it. So what I do is I treat myself by wearing these goggles. Can you see the goggles? They're blackout goggles. They're not just allowing some light in, they're totally blackout. And then I could also wear these. They're a little bit more awkward. These are not complete blackouts, so I don't use them very often because not only are they awkward, but more importantly, they don't block all of it. And I also keep my eyes closed. So I have the skin barrier of closed lids as well as this highly protective blackout. Now, what does the blue light do? It can burn the retina in both eyes and you could go blind. So it's something to be really careful about. So that's what the device looks like. I'm going to turn it off. So with this device, I treated myself 3 treatments, 20 minutes each, 10 on one side, and then I turned around and did 10 on the other side. And in 3 days, actually I did it every other day. So in 6 days, the rash was gone. The itch was gone after the second treatment. Also, I treated a friend that had Grover's, one treatment, and he claimed, I didn't see his before and after pictures, he claimed it was a huge difference. The itch was gone and he didn't need another treatment. And then I had another friend who has a skin disorder called perikeratosis. It's a skin disorder that is inherited from either your mother or your father. And it got so bad, his wife called me to ask if I could treat him. Now, I am an engineer, but I'm not a doctor, and I don't treat people in my house like the old days where doctors would do that. But she was desperate. She said he couldn't sleep. It was painful, inflamed. And I was out of town. So I gave her access into my basement and told her how to start the equipment up, how to use the eye protection, and had her husband stand in front of the light 10 minutes one side, 10 minutes the other. And he did it 3 times. And he sent me a note saying the improvement was incredible. He was now sleeping. The soreness and the swelling and the red was gone. Now it was sort of a grayish color. He was totally amazed with the difference. And he had been going to doctors for a long, long time. So I felt there is something about blue light and the immune system that is appealing. So I filed a patent. And I'll show you what a patent looks like. Can you see this? Joanna, tell me if you can see it. Okay. So this is what the cover looks like. And then this is the more important information. Any of you know how long a patent lasts? 20 years. And there's parts to a patent that are pretty critical. The first is that you have to have an abstract or a summary of the invention. And then the second part, which is the most important, is you have to have a fair bit of research into the prior art. And what they mean in the patent offices when they ask about prior art is what have others done, either in patenting or in publishing, that impacts or is related to your invention. So you have to do a lot of research. Fortunately, with the web, it's a little easier than it used to be, and find out what others have done, what other patents exist, and then establish your claims, which is your points of why your invention is new and novel and effective relative to the other patents that have been issued. And then finally, you need a detailed description of exactly the technical details of the patent. So it took about 9 months to have the patent office go through it. Then I did it for all the major countries in the European Union and in Canada. So I have several patents now on this device established around the treatment of dermatological conditions. So one of the things that I've done since getting the patent is I'm on the board of the engineering school at Northwestern University outside of Chicago. And through that relationship, I started working with them on could they, because they have a great engineering school and a great medical school, work with me on doing some clinical trials. So we tried initially in 2019 and 2020, 2021, and were curtailed by the COVID impact across the country on hospital discretionary research. And with the disease spreading so fast and so many people being affected by it, dying from it, there was no discretionary research allowed in any of the hospitals. So as a result, I was delayed 2 years. We completed last year 10 patients, and they were all successfully treated with Grover's disease with the blue light. In fact, this morning I was going through editing a publication that'll go out in the Journal of American Medical Association dermatology section on our early findings through this first trial. So now I'm in further negotiations with Northwestern to try 30 patients in a second phase and to work a little bit more on getting FDA approval for the actual device, or the beginning of FDA approval. I think probably in the discussions that you've had and the work you've done, you've looked at what other diseases might be affected or improved by blue light. And we're going to try 2 other diseases that we think blue light might be successful. So we're going to test Grover's, something called atrophic dermatitis, which is a skin disorder that young children have typically, that's normally treated with lots of internal medicine and steroids, et cetera, which isn't particularly good for young infants and young children. And we think there's a high probability, because it's an immune system dysfunctionality that gets better as the children grow up. We think that Grover's plus this disease could be benefiting from blue light. And the third thing, which was a surprise to me, is the doctors at Northwestern University think blue light will lower high blood pressure, people's low blood pressure to normal. So we're going to be testing that. That could be a blockbuster in terms of the number of people that would be benefiting from this. So that's the story. One thing I did in my testing that I think is worth sharing with you is I was trying to figure out, do you have to be shirtless to get the benefits of the sun? And what does different fabric do in terms of reducing the amount of blue wavelength of light that would pass through a shirt into your body, onto your skin? So I tested different materials. And what I did is I went into my closet and picked out different shirts and then I could read what the shirt composition was. So I had some polo shirts. They were white and simple little summer short sleeve shirts, cotton. Then I had fishing shirts, sailing shirts that had UV protection. You know, the shirts that you can wear today that can give you, SPF 50 or SPF 40. So you don't have to put skin tan lotion on and then have the shirt on top of that. And then I tried a hunting shirt I had, which was made out of wool and meant for staying warm in super cold weather. So I found the UVA shirts, I'm not the UVA, but the shirts that have the treatment to keep sunlight from penetrating, and the cotton shirts. 90% of the blue light would pass. The wool shirt, 10% would pass. And it's a function of the density of the fabric. And you can imagine a wool shirt being much more dense, and that's why you wear it when it's cold. And it even blocks wind sometimes, depending on how thick the wool is, from hitting your skin. So it was an interesting study to realize that you don't necessarily have to have your skin fully exposed. You could be wearing a light cotton shirt, and the vast majority of the blue light wavelength will pass through. The other thing I did is I looked at different angles. Instead of just thinking the sun is perpendicular to a target, it's more likely to be at an angle because of the height of the sun relative to how you're positioning, especially if you're playing golf, standing upright. And of course, that goes with the geometry of an angle. So there was no surprise there. So unless there's other questions on sort of the nature of the invention, but I go back to the beginning, necessity is the mother of invention. So I had the itch, I had the technical background to feel comfortable to try and experiment. And I saved the hardest approach to solve the problem for last. And that was the approach that worked, which is sort of typical in life. I think you may try one or two things, it doesn't work, don't give up, because the third or fourth try might be the solution. So the patents are all completed, and now we're starting to embark on the study at Northwestern. I have 4 more prototype machines that are even more high powered than the one that I've shown you in my basement here at home that I think will accelerate the impact that this blue light has in terms of further studies. So if there's no other questions, I'll just talk a little bit about my background and why I wanted to start Engineering Tomorrow. So I'm proud to be an engineer. I have 2 engineering degrees, one from the United States Merchant Marine Academy, Kings Point, New York. It's a federal academy like West Point or the Naval Academy under the Department of Transportation for serving in the Merchant Marine. And they offered 2 general disciplines of study. One was engineering, the other one was marine transportation. And you could be a chief engineer on a ship with the engineering degree, or you could be a captain or a first mate of a ship with the transportation degree. The reason I went there is I was sponsored by Bobby Kennedy when he was senator of New York State, and it's free, just like the Naval Academy or West Point. And that was important because my family was a lower income family in Queens, a borough of New York City. After graduating, while attending the school, I had to spend a year at sea. And I realized I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. Pretty lonely. And I thought it was kind of dull and very boring until there was an emergency. And then it was very exciting. So you'd have, 95% of the time boredom and 5% of the time, maybe too much excitement. So I went to get a master's degree at Northwestern University in a hybrid degree, chemical and environmental engineering. And I went to work for a company called Linde Division of Union Carbide. And they were making industrial gases, so nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, helium. And I worked on a project that was converting municipal waste to fuel back in the early 70s when we had the first energy shocks, 73, 74, 75. It was a fascinating project. I really loved the work. We built a 200 ton per day municipal waste conversion facility, but the costs got so high that we weren't able to make the economics work. So I moved to a different branch of Union Carbide, Linde Division, and again, a young engineer, and I got my first patent, and I was developing a technique for decoking fire heaters. basically what that means is we were taking the coke, the carbon that accumulates in these high temperature heaters, and taking it off without having to burn it off, and it would improve the life of the equipment. And it was a novel way of approaching a pretty serious maintenance issue in refineries and chemical plants throughout the world. I then left Union Carbide and went to work for a consulting firm called McKinsey. And they're a firm that does a lot of strategy work for companies planning their future, a lot of operational improvement work, and a lot of organizational design work. Tends to be used by larger corporations as a supplement to management and extra resources to solve problems. And what I think made a difference for me is, with my technical background and problem solving skills and sophistication in math and science, I was pretty good as a consultant because I could analyze things fairly quickly. And I had a powerful toolkit having studied engineering. So I did well in consulting, but decided the travel was getting too constant. We started a young family. I had 2 young kids. I was gone 80% of the time. And I felt like I'd like to get a normal job. So I was recruited away from McKinsey and joined General Electric. There I stayed for 23 years, and I had positions in strategic planning, product management, marketing. And ultimately, I ran several of GE's businesses. The last one was called GE Infrastructure. And then I retired at 59. And I started thinking about what I was going to do next. And I thought about teaching. I thought about doing something in hydrogen technology, something more entrepreneurial. And then I was introduced to a couple of investment bankers from Credit Suisse that were thinking of an idea to start an infrastructure fund. And Joanna described it pretty well. I'll take it one step further. What we do is we buy and operate infrastructure assets around the world in both energy and transportation. So in energy, as an example, we're one of the largest producers of wind and solar energy in Asia and in the United States. We're just now starting out in a serious fashion the introduction of battery storage to help, in addition to wind and solar, as sources of energy for the future. We also own a number of pipelines that move energy from the well into transportation centers like Houston, and then get disseminated out through the rest of the country. We invest in transportation assets as well. Airports is a big one. We own Sydney Airport in Australia, Gatwick Airport outside of London, and Edinburgh Airport in Scotland are examples of some of our airport operations. We also have several other transportation assets associated with both air as well as freight. And passenger rail. One of the big rail businesses that we own is called Italo. It's the high-speed rail system. There's 2. There's one that's run by the government, and there's one that's run by us, Italo, that provides very high-speed rail. And if you think about the geometry configuration of Italy, it's perfect for high-speed rail because it's long and narrow, so we can go down the spine of Italy at high speed. And it's wide at the top, so we can create a T-shaped configuration, and we can go from Rome to Milan in less than 3 hours, and do it for about 18 euros. So it's cheaper than if you drove your car, far faster. In fact, it's as fast as taking a plane when you take into account the time it takes to go to the airport, wait for the flight, and et cetera. So it's a very appealing asset. Very difficult during COVID because we lost all our passengers. And it's no fun to have a railroad with no volume, no people, no passengers. So that was awkward time period, but we got through it. So that's my background. And having an engineering background has been incredibly powerful in Global Infrastructure Partners, my current firm, because we do a lot of optimization work. We figured out how to optimize security processing. That's the procedure you go through where your bag goes through the X-ray and you normally have to stand in line. And in the US, the processing speed is around 150 to 180 passengers an hour. Through design optimization and using Lean and Six Sigma techniques, tools engineers learn, we move the processing speed to over 700 passengers an hour. So we're going 4 times faster. So then you could say, well, what's your detection rate of a weapon or an explosive? And despite going 4 times faster, I'm proud to say as engineers, we figured out a way to do it, and we have triple the detection level of the slower speed system. So not only are we faster, but we are more likely to find contraband than any other system in the world. What does that do? 95% of the time, the queue through security in our airports is less than 5 minutes. As I said, the detection level is triple that of competitor systems, and our cost is 40% cheaper, and we use 50% less space. So we have more space available for other activities in an airport terminal. That innovation was led by 2 engineers from, one from Pennsylvania, one from Connecticut, that were really good at time and motion studies. One was a chemical engineer, the other one was a mechanical engineer. We've since used that security system in all of our airports, and we're now in the process of implementing it at Sydney. Another thing that we did at Gatwick Airport using algorithms and mechanical sequencing models is we took the runway there, which is a single runway, and was the busiest single runway in the world at 50 movements an hour. So that meant an airport was either departing or arriving 50 times in an hour. We moved it to 55 through our sequential modeling and our work. 2 engineers did it. Eric Einstead, a PhD chemical engineer, and some of us in Engineering Tomorrow know Eric quite well. And then a mechanical engineer named Glenn Johnson, who went to the University of Pennsylvania. Those 2 men in 2 years were able to break the record of the most movements of any airport in the world to 55. We're now on track for 60. The difference is huge in terms of the ability to handle so much more traffic at peak period, which is when everybody wants to travel. So that engineering background has become so useful. In fact, I would say, without bragging, that our firm is known by investors, people who lend us the money and invest in our projects, as the best in the world. They love the fact that we have about 35 detail-oriented optimization experts with engineering backgrounds. Most of them are ME types. There's some ceramic engineers. There's some industrial. Frankly, once you get out and start working, the degree specification becomes less important. It becomes more what you're interested in, what you're good at, what you love to do. So I originally studied mechanical and fell in love with chemical and spent more time doing chemical than the undergrad degree. And that happens frequently. So why did I start Engineering Tomorrow? I grew up in Queens from a low-income family, and no one went to college, so we didn't even talk about university. I remember when I went to high school, public high school, I saw we had to cover our books, and my mom used to cover it with those brown paper bags you get from a grocery store. She was very artistic, and she could cut it, get it to fit, fold it. I don't even think she used Scotch tape. And so I had brown paper bag covers on my books. Well, some of the people in my class had covers with the names of colleges. And I sat next to this kid and I saw Purdue Boilermaker. And I asked, what is that? And that was my first exposure as a freshman in college to the thought of, freshman in high school, to the thought of there is college, there's something else you can do after high school. Also, I felt there was little connection in my high school to the application of math and science to solving real world problems. I didn't see any ability to transform some of the learning into practical applications. And then lastly, I felt if we could mentor students and show them what engineers do and talk to them about the field and have them meet students that are about their age and what it's like to study engineering, and then meet people like Joanna and myself who can teach it, it would give them a better sense of a decision they could possibly make to study engineering and have a different path out of poverty or out of an environment where you don't get the kind of exposure that you might in a more affluent community. So the whole idea was to give back. I had a lot of success. I had a lot of fun, and to help society. And I felt this is doubly good because I'm going to help kids to have bright futures in a creative field that is just so much fun to be a part of. And it helps America because our future is going to be based on technology, innovation, creativity, and that's going to be led by science and math and engineers and the scientists that do this kind of work. So I think our mission really has two powerful incentives here. One is to help kids see the opportunity to be an engineer and to pursue it and have a career that's just fascinating and fun and also lucrative, and also help America to keep its competitive edge. So this past academic year, we trained 31,000 students. We've seen in some of the data that we have a 25% increase in the number of students that go through Engineering Tomorrow and then apply for engineering school and college. So that's why I did it. Now, why is engineering fun? It's sometimes not fun to study because it can be grueling. It can take a lot more time than other fields to study. But I think the engineering foundation is a source of huge creativity. And when I think about creativity and look back on over 50 years of life in the work environment and industry, creativity is a function of a couple of things. One is being curious, having a lot of questions about why do things work a certain way? Could something work differently? Being curious about what causes Grover's disease and what could treat it is really important. The other thing that's really important is having keen observation skills. Really have a discerning eye for what's different. What's the difference between A or B? What's really happened? Understanding what was occurring on my body and what might be causing it and why was it occurring certain times a year and not other times a year was really key, in my opinion. And then the third element of this little triangle is having the tools to find solutions. And that's where an engineer has the tools. They think economically, they think with a science background, and they think mathematically. So when we went into an airport and looked at the way security was being processed, I went in with the intellectual curiosity of why has it got to be 180 passengers an hour? Why do we do it this way? Why can't we do the following? And then observing what other airports are doing and seeing they've fallen into the rut of all being the same. And then having the tools, the math and the science and the information technology background to figure out a way to triple, in some cases, quadruple the speed, while also getting higher detection rates by a factor of 3. So that's all part of the creative process. So that's kind of my summary of engineering and why I did Engineering Tomorrow, why I established it. I'm proud to say that we're racing along towards this new academic year. We think we can hit 100,000 students, which was a goal I thought we could only do in 5 or 6 years from now. So with that, I'll open up to questions.
Yeah, Bill, I just wanted to open up a question. This one comes from John Dewey High School, and I thought it followed up well to your story about the reason for founding Engineering Tomorrow. And that is, you founded this organization because you wanted to have lab opportunities for students. And these students are interested in knowing, did you have good lab opportunities when you were in school? And you talked about the brown paper on the textbooks.
Yeah.
Was there lab equipment?
There was lab equipment, but I would say it was only until I got to physics where I thought the labs were interesting. Even the chemistry labs were were very much Bunsen burner, boiling, nothing really outstanding. One lab jumped out of in my head when you asked this question was we were looking at the amount of energy used to boil a certain quantity of water. And we were talking about phase change and some of the thermodynamics. And then we would do the calculation in theory, and then we'd actually do the reality. And of course, the difference is the inefficiencies of doing it in the real environment. And I was fascinated how close we could get using understanding of the temperature and the heat required to boil, and then the phase change heat required. And I marveled at the fact that we could actually predict how much energy would be required to boil off all this water. And that's the first time in a simple experiment I connected the dots between, I see how physics and math can be used to predict an outcome. And that was really helpful for me to get excited about studying engineering. So overall, the answer to my question is most of my labs weren't all that exciting, but that one kind of, it lit the light bulb off.
Hi, Bill. Megan here. Thanks for asking. You addressed a lot of the questions that were pre-submitted, but we've had some come up throughout your presentation. This one actually comes from Christine's students at Christine's school, School of the Holy Child. How did you fund scaling up the technology from your basement to the system for clinical trials? Were there research grants available?
No, that would have taken a long time. What I did, it didn't cost me much money. Because I had worked at GE Lighting and I befriended this technician, he talked to his boss about the fact that if this is successful, they could sell a lot of light LEDs in the future. And so they gave me a second set of prototypes. So it didn't cost me anything. I used my relationships and my friendships and my technical ability to convince people that it would be good for their business if they helped me.
Thanks. Okay, one more question. What is the goal after the clinical trials? Will this be a therapy delivered at home or in a doctor's office?
Yeah, it's a great question. So after this clinical trial, I think what's going to happen is we'll have to go to FDA approval. And there's two streams of FDA approval. One is fast and one is slow. Because this is a device that is not being like a medication that you swallow and has potential side effects that could take years to understand, we can do the fast track, and it would probably take a year. During that course of the year, we will get FDA approval for both a consumer product as well as one administered in a doctor's office. I think, because of how basic this process is, if we could get comfortable with the risk of somebody not wearing eye protection, it will become a consumer product. You really don't need a doctor's office to tell you you've spent 10 minutes on one side and you should now turn over. So I'm thinking more and more that it might become a consumer product.
Well, these have been some phenomenal questions. I want to say thank you to Bill for leading this amazing keynote and wrapping up our amazing phototherapy day today. I want to say thank you to all the students who participated. We loved your engagement. I hope you had fun making up your treatment plans. And I know some of them were super pricey, but we'll get to more efficient plans soon. I know you guys are going to keep working on them. I want to say thank you to Joanna Cottle for leading an amazing day today and everybody who participated. We are looking forward to our next event, which is on November 14th. We have we're going to be working with Gatwick and doing a building bridge with some students in the UK and the US. So please don't hesitate to give us a shout and let us know you want to join that day. We are so excited and I hope you guys had fun. Please also don't forget to complete your exit tickets. If somebody could pop the exit ticket link in chat, that would be amazing. And also please share your photos from today. We love to see students work. And I know that there was a lot of fun going on today. So hope we get to see some of your work on Instagram, and please send them to us via email. And what a phenomenal day. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you to the whole ET team here for making it work today. And we look forward to seeing you for the next one. Have a phenomenal day, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, Christine. Thank you.